Fingolfin is one of the most legendary and powerful elves to ever exist. He recently featured on our video listing the most powerful elves to ever live in Middle-earth, and since then we have been bombarded with requests to cover his full story. So here we go, I hope you enjoy.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
Fingolfin was the second High King of the Noldor being one of the three branches of the elves. He was the son of Finwë and the younger half-brother of Fëanor. His four children were Fingon, Turgon, Aredhel and Argon. He was born in Valinor during the Years of the Trees and was never particularly close to his half-brother Fëanor. This lack of a close relationship would lead to problems later on in Fingolfin's life, but we will get to that a bit later. Anyway, they lived in peace with each other for many centuries. However, the peace in Valinor was soon brought to an end when Melkor, one of the Valar and main source of evil in Arda, was released from his imprisonment by the other Valar after faking his repentance. When in fact his malice and bitterness had only festered and grown, and he planned to take revenge upon the elves because he blamed them for his downfall. Of the three branches of the elves, it was only the Noldor that really welcomed Melkor, for he was said to have the most knowledge of all the Valar. Soon after gaining their confidence, Melkor started spreading lies and rumours amongst them regarding the intentions of the Valar. The Noldor elves soon began debating if they should remain in Aman. One of the more vocal elves about this was Fëanor, as one of the lies that had been told was that the sons of Finwë, of which Fingolfin was the eldest, were trying to supplant Fëanor as the rightful heir of Finwë and seize the Silmarils, three unbelievably powerful gems that Fëanor had created. Now, we obviously already know that Fëanor was not particularly fond of his half-siblings, so he took very little convincing to believe that this rumour was in fact true. Fëanor confronted Fingolfin with his sword drawn, threatening him with violent actions. When the Valar discovered what Fëanor had done to his brother, they called him to them to explain himself. Here, Melkor's lies were quickly discovered, although Fëanor was still held accountable for his threats against Fingolfin and was banished to a fortress in the north. It wasn't until 12 years later at a festival in Valinor that the brothers made up, although Fëanor did so grudgingly. It was then at this festival that Melkor and the monstrous spider Ungoliant attacked, destroying the two trees of Valinor and darkening all of Aman. They then attacked the fortress of Formenos, where Fëanor had been staying, and here Melkor killed Finwë and stole the Silmarils. In his grief and anger, Fëanor looked for revenge against Melkor, who at this point was going by the name Morgoth, and he tried to convince the rest of the Noldor elves to join him, telling them that if they journeyed with him to Middle-earth, it would bring them great treasure and glory. However, many of them were not convinced and turned to Fingolfin for advice, as he was more trusted than his brother. Although not particularly keen to leave Valinor, Fingolfin had sworn to Fëanor to uphold his peace as the elder brother, yet he did not want to abandon his people alone to his selfish brother, so he decided he would accompany Fëanor to Middle-earth. This is where things started going truly wrong. Fingolfin then became the leader of the second and largest group of Noldor elves to leave for Middle-earth. Fëanor led the first, and Fingolfin's brother Finarfin led the third, which was the smallest, and it's worth noting, the most reluctant of the groups. The majority of the second and third groups were actually made up of those that were more reluctant, and this actually led to them taking longer to set out than the host led by Fëanor. This delay caused Fingolfin to make a mistake. For not long after setting out, Fëanor attempted to seize the fleet of the seafaring Teleri elves, thinking that they could use their ships to get to Middle-earth faster and safer. However, the Teleri resisted, and when Fingolfin's group caught up with Fëanor's, they were already in a heated battle. Seeing this, Fingolfin mistakenly assumed that the Teleri had attacked the Noldor, maybe even at the request of the Valar as punishment for leaving Valinor. So he and his host joined the battle against the Teleri and completed the first elven kinslaying. After the battle and the theft of the ships, the Noldor encountered a figure, possibly of Mandos himself, who proclaimed a terrible doom upon them for their actions. Hearing this, Fingolfin thought about turning back and returning to Tirion, where they had come from. The rest of the Noldor continued towards Middle-earth, but as many of them were upset about the kinslaying and were reluctant to begin with, they began to curse Fëanor. In response, he left one night with his most loyal followers in the Teleri ships, which he burned upon reaching Middle-earth, abandoning Fingolfin and his host. Realizing that they had been betrayed, Fingolfin and his followers were left with a decision to make. go after Fëanor but have to cross an extremely dangerous icy road to do so, or return to Tirion in disgrace and suffer the punishment of the Valar for their role in the kinslaying. Fingolfin chose to continue to Middle-earth, mainly to confront his brother for his betrayal. Many lives were lost while attempting to travel across these icy roads, only greatly increasing the anger and wrath that they felt towards Fëanor and his host. They finally arrived in Middle-earth in year 1 of the First Age, and were attacked straight away by an orc army, resulting in the death of Fingolfin's youngest child. Destroying the rest of the orc force, Fingolfin approached the doors of Andband, Morgoth's great fortress. But Morgoth and his servants were dismayed by the newly risen sun and stayed inside, leaving war for another day. Fëanor's host had settled in the northern shores of Lake Mithrim. They were attacked here by a large force of Morgoth's orcs, and despite being largely outnumbered, managed to defeat their foes with relative ease. However, Fëanor, in his pride, chose to chase down the small surviving group of escaping orcs, and upon reaching Angband, Fëanor and the small group that followed him came upon a group of Balrogs, and were quickly slain. Fëanor lasted a little longer, but fell at the hands of Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs. If you want to know more about Gothmog, we recently released a full video on him, so go and check that out if you're interested. So after this, Morgoth gave a false offer of parley to the new leader of Fëanor's host. Expecting to be betrayed, both sides sent greater forces than agreed to the site of the negotiation. But Morgoth came with Balrogs, who again quickly killed the Noldor force and captured Maethros. After learning of this, Fingon went and rescued him, having been great friends before the decisive actions of Fëanor. They both returned to the remaining Noldor, who were all very impressed by Fingon's actions. Attempting to keep his people united, Maethros waived his claim to kinship, and Fingolfin was appointed as the king of the Noldor. From here they established mighty kingdoms in Beleriand, and all attacks by Morgoth's forces were repelled with relative ease. Fingolfin retained close friendship and counsel with Maethros. So although Fingolfin's forces were able to repel attacks from Morgoth's orcs, they did not yet possess the strength to attack Angband directly. Morgoth had spent centuries building his armies and creating creatures that were far more deadly than orcs. After he achieved what he considered to be a sufficient amount of servants, his armies attacked Beleriand, accompanied by huge volcanic eruptions, Balrogs, orcs, and the dragon Glaurung. They pushed back the Noldor defences and slaughtered unnumbered amounts of elves. The huge losses and defeat that the Noldor had suffered caused a great wrath to overcome Fingolfin. He decided to travel to Angband alone and challenge Morgoth to single combat. After he reached the gates of Angband, he shouted his challenge to Morgoth for all to hear. And although Morgoth was said to be the mightiest of all things in the world, he was reluctant to accept the challenge. However, Fingolfin's insults could not be ignored without Morgoth losing face in front of his captains. So he put on his black armour, took up his great mace Grond, and emerged from Angband. Fingolfin drew his sword Ringel and the duel began. The Elven King managed to evade all of Morgoth's blows and wounded the Dark Lord 7 times. But after a while, fatigue caught up with him and he began to slow. Morgoth beat him into the ground 3 times, but each and every time Fingolfin got back to his feet and continued to fight. Eventually, Fingolfin stumbled back into one of the pits in the ground that was caused by Morgoth's missed strikes with Grond. The Dark Lord then stepped on Fingolfin's neck and killed him. However, with his last strike, Fingolfin managed to cut into Morgoth's heel. After the battle, Morgoth took Fingolfin's body and broke it, intending to feed it to his wolves. But the Lord of the Eagles, Thorondor, swooped down and slashed at Morgoth's face. He retrieved Fingolfin's body and brought it to the mountaintop overlooking Gondolin. After his father's death, Fingon became the High King of the Noldor, and Morgoth was left with wounds that pained him forever. He even walked with a limp hereafter. So that is the story of Fingolfin. What a fantastic character with an awesome story. So we get asked all the time if we think that there will ever be a movie adaptation of the Silmarillion, which I do think is extremely unlikely. But I think there is a good chance of them taking individual stories such as this one and perhaps creating a spin-off series about it. It's quite likely that if this Lord of the Rings on Prime show does well, especially with them now having the rights to the Silmarillion, that they will be doing plenty of spin-off shows. Some First Age stories such as this one would fit absolutely great for a TV show in my opinion. So my question for you guys today is this. Would you like to see Fingolfin in live action, or is he a character best left to the imagination of reading? Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments down below. Okay, so time has come, as always, to thank our patrons and channel members. You guys are absolutely amazing. An extra special shout out goes to the members of our highest tiers: Gregory Nashith, John, Andrew, Denver Steel, and Pirate747. And we want to shout out our limited special tier on Patreon: Kevin, Abram, Matt, and Glorfindel of Gondolin. As members of this tier, you of course all get executive producer roles on our film and will be able to give feedback on the story itself during pre-production, which we are currently approaching the end of. We've been over the moon with the positive feedback to the script and we can't wait to get started with production. If you guys aren't aware, 100% of support on Patreon is going towards the budget of our short film, so if you want to support that film, that is how you can do so. Check us out on Patreon at The Broken Sword. A very quick reminder to check out our other channels, The Sixth Ranger and History of Dragon Ball, for some nostalgic Power Rangers and anime lore. The links will be in the description down below if they are of any interest to you. Thank you all so much for watching, I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.